I just want to welcome you to today's session, the part 2 of the Vshn case. And before we dive into that, I just want to hear from a few of you what brought you here today.
I can start. My name is Jonas and I'm part of the first session, and I was impressed with the presentation was so honest. What went wrong and what went good. So that's the reason I'm looking forward to session 2.
Well, I know Kathryn and Marco for a couple of time, and we already had some very interesting discussions on the topics of organizing. And I'm very excited and wondering how the story goes on.
I'm just here because Timo told me to be here. Hi, Timo.
This is how it works.
Yeah. Now I'm from SysTech, and we also want to be self-organized. And I contacted Marco once because they are nearby, and so I'm curious how they continue. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Which S3 pattern is this, Timo?
Tell me what to do.
Okay.
So let's hear from maybe one or two more people.
Yes, plain curiosity.
I was here last time as well, and it was very interesting. And I specifically came for the visualizations and documentation. And that was for this session. So therefore I'm back. And I'm sorry I have no video.
So I thank you for sharing about why you came here. I'm hoping to engage you in this session later on as well, after we hear part 2 of this case study from Kathy and Marco. And then, would be useful for all of us, I think, to hear some reflections, insights from what you heard. There is a Miro board that we're going to use for capturing notes and questions and reflections. Last time, the Zoom chat was pretty active, but I'd like to encourage you to move any interaction there because it's much more difficult to follow 3 different spaces. And it's a much easier way of recording or documenting any notes from this session. So that being said, I want to straight off pass to Kathy and Marco. For those of you who didn't meet them last time, they would probably just introduce themselves briefly. And that's it.
So welcome, and want to introduce Kathy to you. She's our agile coach, and started roughly 1 year ago at Vshn, and was meant to coach our tech teams. But while starting there, we found out together that we also have issues on a higher level at Vshn, mainly with our identity being unclear, the purpose, and what we actually offer as a business. So there was kind of some chaos there. And then this was why her focus shifted, and we started to support each other in the management and the board, and to bring those topics on track first. And now with our realignment being on track and having this new identity, she's now going back into the teams and helping to build up and further develop the teams. And one could say that, she's the one who points out what we might be missing at Vshn.
And this is Marco Fretz. He started at Vshn as a system and network engineer over 6 years ago, and he moved into customer account management, then started to think about organizational development and digging into S3 about 3 years ago. And then he joined the management team. And right now he's focusing on representing the management in its delegator role towards the teams at Vshn, and literally all of the domains at Vshn. And he's developing modern leadership skills while doing so. And that's his big focus right now. Marco is the guy who knows how Vshn works.
So what you can expect today, as Lily said, it's the part 2. So it's all about our story from learning to doing to using S3, to use the power of S3. it's also a lot about doing S3 in stealth mode and what the limitations of that are. And one bigger topic is also the whole opinions and preferences, personal preferences, when we actually just want to get those objections, right? And then, as promised, it's also about how we document and track all the organizational things at Vshn. And to give a little context here, which isn't meant to be a marketing slide, just to give some context, we are an IT company. We help software developers of maybe web shops or insurance broker platforms or whatever to run their applications in the cloud or on-prem. And it's all about web application operations where we take 24/7 ownership that stuff runs. And we do a lot of Kubernetes platform stuff and software as a service, mainly like databases and other things that they need to actually run their web application. So we're IT guys, most of us.
And I'm going to tell you the story, to start the story of how Vshn goes S3. So Vshn was founded in 2014 with the idea that there's no need for classic explicit leadership or leadership roles. We make decisions as we go, and we make those decisions together. And these are the essential values in Vshn's company culture. One day in April 2020, because of some customer work overruling everything, we couldn't wait any longer with building a new product that we had been wanted to offer for some time. And when nobody magically found a way to make time for it, top management started a task force for it and asked some of the engineers to join this task force. People were not happy because visionaries were used to making the big decisions together, and this was a big decision, as people would be pulled out of their existing teams. And this decision was made without asking the teams. So we had violated our own agreement. To calm the waves, management promised never to do this again and to find a way that we could make these big impact decisions together from now on. So this is when we tried consent decision making from S3. It can't be that hard. Let's do it. There's a practical guide. There's clear steps in it. And we're IT guys and we can read and try something. What can go wrong? That's what Marco was thinking 3 years ago. Oh my, a lot of things went wrong. There were proposals made, but then there was heated discussion in chat, explosions in meetings, opinions being flung around everywhere. And what people wondering, where the hell is this reasoned argument? And what are all these other ideas and things that people are coming up with that are not reasoned arguments? So the truth is painful that nobody really knew how to actually do this in practice. We understood what consent decision making was from the guide. We knew the steps and the purpose, but we couldn't use it in a way that could actually help us make decisions or follow through on them. Nobody knew the impact of doing consent decision making or other S3 patterns well. Well, we're IT guys. We know tech, right? Tech is complicated and predictable. Social things are complex and unpredictable. And S3 is about social, not about tech. Okay, so we decided to learn. Marco, thanks. Everyone needs to know S3. Then this will work much better. So this is when we started learning. We did a lot more self-study, and we contracted S3 and organizational development coaching, a training via Timo and his company Sfera. Timo, will you give us a wave and a hi or something?
Yes, here. Hi.
Yeah. So Timo and his company Sfera did the training, and that included internal education sessions in S3 basics, theory on S3 principles and patterns, mandatory session for everyone. And there was a 1-hour crash course for new employees, and also deep dives on S3 topic for the facilitator role, particularly for months continued after that. So the feedback was, this makes sense, I like it, but I need to see this working. So most people were pretty convinced by the theory, and it was clear that the principles aligned with vision, but will it really work? All of these processes and confusion with special terms was the reality that people were experiencing. They wondered, like, what is this driver? Can we please use a better term? We started to really do S3 at Vshn. We kept a governance backlog and a logbook. We defined our governance process via a Jira workflow. We made written proposals in wiki pages. We did governance and documentation to define our existing domains. And we had many, many Zoom sessions doing proposal forming. We did this pattern by the book using a Miro template. So something is happening. We're able to make decisions, but we're also confusing people. And it feels like bureaucracy for a lot of people, but still we're clarifying our problems. And we're making a lot of decisions, but it wasn't that effective because we were making decisions, but not implementing them. And it's easy to decide when you don't have to actually implement it. And it's easy to have no objections when people are silent because they don't understand what's happening, they don't care. And it's so much harder to bring people, to bring possible objections up to existing agreements because people just don't know how or where or who to go to. And they might not even know about the agreement. So it's like we brought in S3 process without the supporting structure underneath it. So problems were visible, but we had this growing governance backlog. We were defining a lot of problems, but these problems were not always organizational drivers. And we didn't understand how to answer the question, will it help the organization? And use that to prioritize or even discard drivers. And personal preferences or ideas, those were also documented, and they were often disguised as organizational drivers and not caught. We were writing proposals in Wiki and trying to problem solve in Wiki. And so when you try to do qualifying arguments as objection in a written way, especially when it's done asynchronously, it's super inefficient. And when you're integrating objections into complex proposals, that's even harder. So this led to frustration and often resignation because we were doing this for every proposed idea, right? For making changes to Vshn, and the people stopped involving themselves. And this is some real feedback from a Vshn employee, and we have their permission to share it. And in the spirit of being fully open and honest with you about what perspective here, I want to share it. I find it rather irritating that when it comes to expressing my opinion to actively contribute to the company, I have to pedantically adhere to S2 bureaucracy, which even after 1 year after I started here, I still cannot wrap my head around. So Vshn doesn't do S3. A few people at Vshn use S3 heavily. So other people are often part of the practices without having to know it. That we have delegate circles. And in their delegate circles, yes, they are about governance only. But what it means to do governance and to be a delegate can be misunderstood because most of the work to do governance is actual work. Like you have to research, you have to prepare to facilitate, then you have to actually facilitate that. Then you participate in the actual decision making. Then you have to implement, and before and after the governance meeting. So that means delegating responses. That means reviewing effectiveness, and that means owning these items that are assigned to you as a delegate circle representative. So when you sit as a delegate in a delegate circle, it's really just the tip of the iceberg to go to the meeting. What it actually means to be a delegate is a massive amount of work underneath that. So this leads to confusion and frustration. People stop caring about most decisions until they're affected by it. And making all decisions visible to everyone and trying to be transparent, but then it overwhelms people. And they feel that they have to contribute and to make it perfect, or they feel their opinions need to be represented. And we were using formal processes by the book, and these failed. using governance as a process didn't feel natural, and having explicit facilitation also didn't feel natural anymore. So the question is, does everyone at Vshn need to know S3? Our answer: not yet, not everyone. When we talk about stealth mode, stealth is S3 without the official vocabulary, where you do the patterns, you live the principles, you even teach the principles, but you make it feel natural and you ask in an easy language. You might say something like, we need to have a solution for X next week because of Y. And I have this proposal here. Do you see a risk that we should avoid? A way to improve it now. Do you think we should try this for 2 months and check again? Instead of, do you consent to this driver? Do you have possible objections to this proposal? And sure, the official language in S3 is more clear, is more accurate, perhaps. But doing it by stealth gets people to understand. And when you do stealth, you're doing S3 for others. So you lead to get to the agreement and to the implementation. And the way that we do it at Vshn with all of our patterns, essentially, is to get feedback on the driver. We gather information, and then we gather information during workshops. Then we start a proposal and let people ask questions about it, and then edit it collaboratively. Then we ask for possible objections, also by stealth. So that means, so in governance meetings, on other occasions, in chat, one-on-ones, and then we sit together and understand, and to talk and understand and integrate objections that we have. And when doing stealth, we make transparent only the thing that people need to know to take the next step. And we've had some enormous success with stealth mode. One example, and there are many, but I'll share some with you. One example is in role definition. So selecting the delegates for new work groups, are one of them. Also consenting to new domains, where we use domain as a term and we stealth the rest. And then having the company consent to the new business the new identity and the business models. That's where we use the term proposal, but we stealth the rest and got consent via lean coffee sessions and one-on-ones. And as we've done stealth, we've discovered limitations of the stealth mode. One, that it can fail when another person becomes responsible for facilitating the pattern. So for example, if you're going to define a domain or do consent decision making, it isn't enough because you have to guide the process. It isn't enough to have just experienced the process. You actually need a deeper knowledge of S3. Also, when you're going to distinguish opinion versus objection, you need to be super explicit for yourself on what objection is, and you need the practice of differentiating them. And so you need to explain the principle of consent and organizational driver also. Separating problem space from solution space, which is that's a fundamental pattern under the patterns of S3. And if you don't separate problem and solution space explicitly, then you run the risk of it being when you consent implicitly to a driver, then you and then move forward onto a proposal, then you find out that there's still a question as to what the driver is, and then the group has to go back and rework the driver, and a lot of time and is wasted, and a lot of frustration can be built. So at this point, you often this is when you would need to make the separation of the problem and solution space explicit. And I will turn over the screen to Marco to continue.
So the next topic is personal preferences and opinions, and this is a trap we have repeatedly fallen into. And I think it was James that once said that we need to be careful about this thing when we write down that employees are our biggest assets, or we value people, or people first. And there are a lot of companies doing that because it's this "we are a great employer" thing. And it's true, and this is something really that a modern company wants to do. But the thing is that without having a sustainable business that works and that grows and that brings in enough money, there are no people ultimately. And I mean, you know that the thing was you have to pay salaries, so you need the money and to make that work, to make that people first thing work. So business comes first, actually. And I know there are other forms of organizations, but when we talk about the business, then this is really our understanding. And for personal preferences or how to handle them in consent decision making, it's important to see that what an individual person prefers in the process of making decisions, it's not necessarily relevant for the organization. And that might sound very harsh when you tell it like that in a facilitation, and that's why stealthing things can help a little bit. But it's important to see this. And for example, if we have a thing that really becomes a need for more than one person, and especially in IT, this is very important because we are looking for exceptional talent, and to be successful on the job market, giving a new benefit or not removing a benefit when we make a decision about, I don't know, like how we what we give to our employees, then this can really make a difference on how successful we are in getting the talent from the job market that we need. So personal preferences can reveal organizational drivers, or also in consent decision making, they can qualify as an objection, but on their own, they are usually not relevant for the organization. The thing is, it's all about digging into that argument and find out if there is an organizational driver or an objection hidden somewhere. And you really do this by looking at what the organization needs, and then you find out whether that personal thing can count as or can be relevant, right? Now, this goes also into the topic of making decisions together. And as you heard earlier, this is really a thing at Vshn, like we make the big decisions together. While that's true, it's also not really true, because the decision, it really depends on why we need to do it. And it's all about run and grow our business. Ultimately, it's not about giving an individual what they want. But still, it can reveal risks or ways to improve. But on its own, I want this and I want that, and trying to make things right for everyone, this doesn't work. It's not about that. It's primarily about being successful as an organization and enabling people to create value. It's not so much about making it right for everyone. But this is a difficult thing to grasp for people, and it's also tricky to communicate this when people are not fully aware of the principle of consent. On the other side, consent is really something that is very close to how Vshn started. And this is, in how I observe it, this really is the reason why consent works at Vshn. But as I said, it's often hard to grasp for people why their personal opinion is not simply being incorporated into the decision. So this is tricky. And the way how to resolve it really is to always look at, will it help the organization? And for that, you need to know what the organization actually wants to do. And this is where things come together with our identity and purpose not being clear enough, or it wasn't clear enough. And now that we know what we actually want to do as a company, it's also much easier to distinguish opinions from organizational drivers or from objections. Now, the next topic is the tracking, documenting, and making things transparent at Vshn. We are an open source company, an open source organization, and that means that we not only give back to the open source software community, because we are also primarily using open source software for our business. It's also about making our organization transparent to everyone. And for that, because we have no secrets, we can put most of everything that we do at Vshn, we can put that in a public handbook. It's basically a website, and I can give you the link if you don't have it already, and it will be in the presentation here. So you can check out everything what we do at Vshn. And this is great for potential new employees, but also for customers. But it's meant for internal use, obviously, but we can make it public because there are no secrets. Obviously, there are some secrets when it's about legal constraints or like a work contract or something, or business constraints. But overall, we can put most of our things publicly online. And it's a kind of nerdy thing how we do it. It's all in Git versioning. We make documentation as code. We use CI/CD pipelines to actually deploy that website. So it's not that easy to use for non-technical people. That's something we are working on. But for the rest, it works quite well. And it's clean documentation. I will show you this in a minute. And there is obviously more internal documentation, like our governance backlog and the history of governance. It's wiki pages that are meant for internal use, but everyone can see that. And that includes the budget and finance numbers. They are sometimes kind of a little bit harder to get, but everyone can look into things. We don't make a secret out of it. Now some screenshots here, because some of these things are internal. You cannot directly view it. So this is our Jira, and this is our governance Kanban board. So we have a governance process as a workflow in Jira. For those who don't know Jira, it's basically a ticket system and project management system. And for every governance item, like an organizational driver, we create an issue here, and then we move this from left to right on the board. And the difference to tickets, like in support tickets, is that these things are never done. So when something is in agreement, you set the due date, and on that due date, it automatically goes back to review. And then you know that this thing is due for review now. And then you again go from left to right. You choose whether it's an operational action or you have to do governance. And when you do governance, we go into proposal forming. And that doesn't mean that we always stick to the proposal forming pattern of S3. It's simply the step of we need to find a solution. And when we have a good enough proposal, then we go into decision making. And as soon as all objections are integrated, then we move it to agreement, and then it starts over again. And when we review and we find out that the driver is not relevant anymore, then there is a way to basically just drop that item, and then it disappears. But as long as the driver is relevant, it stays on the governance board. And one word about the making things visible only to those affected or those who are responsible. Everyone can see all the VIPs, but you can select the filter, and then you just see the VIPs of your work group or your team or your role. And that greatly helps to stay focused on what you need to care about, and all the rest you can kind of safely ignore for now, because you know it's handled by another group or team. Now, in detail, such a VIP, as we call them, the Vshn improvement proposals, it's just a ticket basically in Jira, and the description is the driver summary. And you see the accountable circle. This is Vshn Geschäftsleitung here, and you see the assignee, that's in this case me. So I own this thing, and I'm the one that is currently driving governance for this thing, or I will be the one who reviews this once it goes back into review. And you have the links to the handbook where the actual proposal, or in this case, that the agreement is documented. And you could click on history, and you see when this moved from review into agreement, and you can see comments here. And this is really about the meta level of doing governance, and the actual content, proposals, agreements, they go usually into the handbook. Now, speaking of the handbook, it's a website, and it has pages, and the page is usually some kind of agreement that comes from governance. And in this case, it's a domain description. You can't see everything here. You can check it out for yourself later if you want. And we have basically all the fields that come from the S3 delegation canvas. We have some variations how we do things around here, but it's basically that canvas in text form. We also add the accountable team so that everyone directly sees who this thing is currently delegated to. And on the bottom, you always have the link back to the governance item, so you can track in which state this proposal or agreement is at the moment. Then, as I said, it's kind of a nerdy thing that we do documentation out of Git, but it has also a very big benefit that we create stable documentation. So you basically create a merge request, which is kind of a change request for the code of the documentation, and you propose your changes, and it automatically goes through a pipeline that checks a lot of things like language and spelling and broken links and stuff. And only when all of that is okay and no one wants to change anything anymore, you click on the merge button, and then it automatically within the next few minutes is published then on the live website of the handbook. And this creates stable documentation that people can trust and take as a source of truth for everything they want to know about the organization or how we do things. Then we also have Confluence wiki pages, and this is usually when we are in the process of creating, coming up with a proposal in a collaborative way, because you can edit the page and 10 people in a meeting can directly edit text, and you can basically just work on it together until you reach the point where everyone thinks it's good enough, and then you have that proposal written down. And at some point, this might be moved into the handbook. And some internal working agreements or processes, they might stay here because they are also very often changed. And yeah, that's about how we do governance and how we document things. And it's about having less tools. More tools don't really help. So we really try to make the handbook the source of truth once stuff is decided. Then let's go a little bit more into how we do things around here. The kind of general answer is, as always, is it depends. In case of governance, it really depends on the complexity of the driver or the situation. And for small things, we really try to stick to what we ever did at Vshn, and that's basically talking with each other, understanding an issue or an opportunity, proposing something, documenting it, implementing it, and while doing so, we inform people. Usually we have a chat channel for announcements, and you directly ask people for possible objections. And it doesn't matter when the objections come because it's already documented and being implemented, and we can say safely that it's okay. You can bring up your possible objection 1 month after that, because we can still amend it and then again ask for possible objections. So this is about moving things forward, moving the smaller things forward very quickly, and not doing this full-blown governance process. Speaking of that, there are obviously very big impact drivers at Vshn, I would say at any business. And this is where we really go through this Kanban style governance tracking and governance process. And the special thing here is that at some point, we look at this driver in the group, and when we understand it, then we delegate this collaborative proposal forming, which basically means collecting considerations and opinions and ideas and constraints and everything. And then usually only 1 or 2 people write the proposal, and then we do the consent decision making. And we often do that in an asynchronous way by sending the proposal, the wiki page, in a chat channel, and ask for clarifying questions and possible objections, but we don't discuss the possible objections in the chat. What we usually try to do is have a meeting, could be a one-on-one meeting or with the whole group, where we qualify and directly integrate those objections if there are any or if they qualify. And after that, it's all about documenting and implementing. And this is the tricky part where, as you heard earlier, where we often failed, because when no one really cares in the sense of owning that governance item to really push it forward, then it often happens that we stop after having an agreement. And this is a big problem, and it sometimes still is. And we are really working hard on making leadership for governance items or leadership in general more explicit because of that. It's not optional that an agreement gets implemented, because if you don't, you can also obviously not see whether it's effective or not. And this is the last step before we review it again. So if you miss that, then stuff is not going to happen. Now, back to those people who say, it makes sense, I like S3, but I need to see this working. It's working better and better nowadays, because we have people who own and lead these governance items. And with that, people are also now experiencing it live, that we actually are able to move forward, that we make changes. This week, we started our new teams. We basically shuffled all people around through self-teaming, and we started new teams this week. So it's a big change for everyone. And all this was done using exactly this process, in stealth or very transparently, depending on where we had to make decisions. But people start to see it and they feel it. And drivers, also the term driver, governance and operations as this differentiation, this is really to becoming a thing and becoming natural at Vshn. And I guess this is a very big step to see S3 working in practice. Now, some conclusions. It's all about learning by doing at Vshn. And I would say this is also true for all the operational work and the technical things at Vshn, because it's like that in our branch of IT especially. And we learn everywhere, in the management team, in our teams, in work groups, which are kind of delegate circle-like for governance, and in our roles. And we do this by offering one-on-one coaching, but also be proactive in supporting people in their new roles. We did quite some foundations training, the official trainings by Lily and James, and also some trainings with Timo and Sfera, for example. And on the other side, we have internal training programs like our role-playing game that Cassie is developing and leading. Maybe you want to say something here?
Yeah. So I've been developing several role-playing game scenarios, particularly for teaching S3. So it's a sci-fi fictional scenario where Vshn in the future has of course expanded to space travel, and so now you're part of a team that is creating a Mars transporter, and androids are commonplace, and programs can be coded with the tap of one button. So basically, anything is possible in this world. But you, as you play as part of this team, doing clarifying your domain with your delegator, making agreements, and defining drivers, making proposals, etc. And we do this all as characters in this futuristic setting. And I developed the game together with Serge Beaumont from Zebia, and so this is a growing thing. So we have done the intro. I have the intro course now, and I'm planning to expand it to be a delegator training module too. So yeah, that's the current.
Okay, then my idea about S3 changed a lot over the last 2 years, and I see it now more in the way that we are now actively and effectively handling the deeper issues at Vshn using S3. And it's not anymore about this idea of everyone needs to know S3 and then stuff will happen. It's really about what you want to do with S3, what you need to do as a business to be successful and grow, and you use that toolbox called S3 to do that. You always pull out the tool that works best in any context and that you have practice in, and you use it, and by that you also teach people. But the primary thing is always to move forward with the impediments and the chances and things you have as a business or in your team or in your role. And this I think is a big change of mind for me, and I would say also in general for Vshn. And we see that things are working now. It's we make a lot of agreements and they actually get implemented, and that's the key here. And we are handling objections more efficiently, and because things are more clear to people, people start to understand what is happening, even if we do things by stealth, but they know what it's all about, why we are doing things. And this also means that often people who were silent in the past, in like rounds when we asked for possible objections, they now speak up more. And with the new roles that we have, also with the new teams that started this week, we already see a lot of engagement and with the people in these roles. And this greatly contributes to addressing all the impediments that now come up with the new teams that we started, because there's so much we couldn't prepare for. And we are now in kind of action mode, fixing the things as they come up. And this really starts to work out great at the moment. Now, resolving all this confusion about S3, we see that a key really is that people don't care until they are affected, and we can use that. We make things clear to those who need to know, like the people accountable for a driver and those affected by decisions. And we limit the view of governance by default, but still, obviously, everything is transparently available for everyone if they want to know, but they don't have to care if they are not responsible or affected, and that means they don't get overwhelmed by these things. And the other big thing is that we really need to meet people where they are. That means we meet them in the language of the group with facilitation and processes, versus just trying to use the S3 language, if you can call it like that, like everywhere in the same way. So it's really about like, do what works for the group and in the context you are in any moment. Now, in summary, we still have quite a lot of people who don't understand at least some of the three principles, and sometimes they might even don't value them personally. And we think that's okay, because we are getting there and we can help people case by case as we go. If we are in decision making and someone doesn't understand the principle of consent, then we can usually resolve that in a one-on-one session with them, and then they know, and then they experienced live what it actually means versus just hearing about it in theory. And of course, you can get a lot of that in S3 courses, and that also works. But we think this is our way of doing things, which doesn't mean that we will not send more people to the S3 courses, but still it works for us. And we have a few people who are heavily using S3 as a tool, and others participate and learn, and it works. Now, I would say it's really a long way that we have ahead for making S3 the way we do things around here. But what is really clear is that S3 is this toolbox that makes Vshn's evolution possible. With that being said, what's next? I guess it's kind of obvious that learning and doing S3 is next in that sense. And it's all about growing our teams, people in our roles, the culture itself through the evolution of our ecosystem. And what we are not so sure about is that mastering like S3 organizational wide governance, that could be a thing that we want to do. On the other side, there is also the point where it's good enough and where it's working okay. And I would say we aren't there, but we are getting there. And we will do whatever it takes to make it work. And if that means that everyone needs to be a master in consent decision making, then we're going to do that. But we will find out.
It depends on what the business needs.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for the presentation. We have actually scheduled only 1 hour for this session. So that means we officially close in 10 minutes. But if you feel inspired and would like to continue the conversation, we'd love to stay on. We already talked about that, and we are available for this. So what I would like for these rest of the 10 minutes, I'd just like to hear some thoughts, impressions, things that are alive for you right now. So let's just hear a few voices from the audience.
I love the honest account and the storytelling. It's really valuable. So thanks for that, both Marco and Kathy.
Yeah, bingo. Really, really nice to see a genuine, non-inflated, but not diminished either representation. At least that's how it feels like when listening.
So there's great resemblance with the organization that I work for. And I love the first part as well and this part as well, because it just, you're a couple of steps ahead of us. And so it gives me a lot of inspiration to hear your stories. Thanks.
The feeling of watching or reading the patterns without actually having experienced them, it's quite familiar. I also wanted to bring S3 into some organization, but like a volunteer association, and the patterns, and I read them, but how they actually do it is quite different.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for me, it's really inspiring on so many levels, so many ways. So I will not mention them all. But I love the idea of the role-playing game. Really good to keep that in mind as well. And it just, what lingers a bit with me is that it sounds like a lot of work. Like a full-time job to, take care of everything. And even though you do it step by step and you're learning on the way, you have already in mind what you want it to be. Personally, I would get impatient, but it's really inspiring. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the thoroughness and dedication with which Vshn is following this path, and I think that's really the crucial thing if you want to be successful with whatever social technology or framework or method you use, and at the same time something that's really often lacking, and that here I see you guys are following through and taking this stuff serious, and this is why it works.
I wanted to say thank you for the amount of work you put in those two presentations, because I'm working in a company too and trying similar things like you, and to take the time to do the meta perspective move and share it with others is not only really valuable to you, I hope, but also now I'd like to share to others. So thank you very much. And I think I consider myself very lucky that we work actually in the same building block. So you're like 200 meters away. So I will come by to share or to ask questions, really, because I think for me the most interesting or resonating a lot now in me is something around how do you, I put it on a orange sticky note, how do you keep this dance alive between pushing, going towards any direction? So we want to go somewhere with S3, but okay, like when you started, you realized, okay, that's not where others are. So we start here, and you still have an idea of where you want to go, but you are here. So you push and you let it go, and you push somewhere, and you create like a fertile soil that people start. And how do you do that? It's a continuous, I assume, very conscious work. And I'm really interested in how you keep that dance alive. But yeah. Very grateful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your reflections. I would like to hear more. We will have like an official ending at past, as we promised. And so before we close, I would really like to know from you, Marco and Kathy, if you were to start all over again with the wisdom and knowledge you have right now, what would you do differently? And so I guess you have different perspectives on this. So maybe we can start with Marco.
I guess I can maybe start on answering that. I think it's not much that we will actually change, because I think it evolved and happened how it had to happen, all in all. There was so much besides S3 that happened at Vshn in parallel. And I think it was all about getting these things sorted out. And all of that was supported through S3. And also we discovered a lot of things by using S3, like describing drivers and making things transparent and documenting where we are at the moment using domains, for example. So I think it really happened how it should have happened. One thing I would change, I think it's understanding the importance of leadership a little bit earlier. This idea of we don't need explicit leadership, this kind of slowed us down a lot. And I would, more S3-like thing, I would say I would have taken the S3 courses earlier. And maybe not try consent decision making for the first time with something like we need a new salary system and we have a proposal here. So this was really, really a big fail because we simply had no idea how it really works in practice and how you distinguish opinions from objections and so on. And I think that's what I would change, like get a little bit more theoretical practice and then try it live. That would have been helpful, but we didn't know, and it evolved how it should, right?
Thanks, Marco. Really useful. How about you, Kathy?
I don't think it evolved as it had to happen. I think it evolved as the company saw it. So initially, the domains, the domains, the use of S3, the roles, etc., evolved according to what the people in the company happened to see at the time, the collective intelligence of people at the time. But what I would have done is to investigate the needs of the business first, and not needs in terms of like what tasks needs to be done or but like investigating customer market fit. Really digging into those connections that we as Vshn have with our environment. So like our stakeholders, our current customers, maybe our culture, maybe our government, for example, to really get that structural coupling established and healthy before bringing in the S3, the governance, before bringing in the governance. And so I would have started there, and then company identity and purpose, which is what we did in the middle here. But I would have started with that, and from there we get the domains that are really relevant to meeting our business need, and to do a process, well, to grow a company up in that way, that needs particular guidance, which I think needs you need to have expertise in S3, but I think you also need expertise as a consultant and in with a larger understanding of how organizational dynamics work, and where Vshn is. So yeah, that's what I would do differently. Yep.
Thank you. I'd love to hear more. I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you so much for joining the session. Would be lovely if you want to stay on. If you want to jump out, please do. And hope to see you in the next case, which is going to be next year, sometime in probably February, something like that. So we'll let you know.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. And I'm here for a while if you want to stay.
I'm here for a while too. I don't have to leave this time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you around. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool. So we have a little group, so we can continue the conversation. Kathy, I don't know if you finished your point from
Yeah. That was mostly the point.
I have a reaction to that. I think you're right. I think that's what I kind of meant with that so much happened and had to happen besides S3.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little chicken egg problem in the sense of you can't know what you don't know, and S3 helped us to understand a few things. And as we said, also you helped us a lot over the last years to see what we didn't see, and I think that all contributed. And ultimately, that's what I mean with it happened how it had to happen. I mean, we can always say we do things differently next time, but there is no next time.
Well, sure, but that was the question from Lily. If we take what we know now,
I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's all about that. We can't know what we didn't know, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, one big lesson or reminder from your story, one of them is the importance of having people from the outside that have a different perspective or certain knowledge and experience that you don't have to look into and input from time to time. And that how, if you don't do that, there's the risk of like kind of disappearing into your own little world and, just continue with your own interpretation of things. At the same time, the fact that you already have some people in the organization that have quite solid knowledge and understanding and skills in terms of using S3 patterns, then you can also then be more kind of handling that internally for yourself and don't need so much external support. So there are two things. One is external support and the other one is external perspective. Somebody who could just like challenge you on certain ways you decided to do things or from time to time.
Yep. And with that also growing up personally. I mean, we were tech people starting a company a few years ago and we stayed like that for a long time, and we thought like, we do the minimum in business administrations and kind of corporate governance and so on. And over time, it wasn't enough anymore. And then people who were actually like technical engineers, they kind of shifted into doing business administration. And I mean, we had people who actually studied that and were also there and helped. But I mean, it's also about growing up personally and starting to understand how what it means to run a business, how an organization works on the economic, on the financial side, and how you keep a business sustainable and so on. I mean, that's quite a learning curve for a few of us.
Yeah, I think it's about maturity. Growing up as a company, getting because I mean realistically, like outcome wise, we're out of the startup phase.
Yeah.
Right. And we need to start, to be able to carry the weight of what we're producing, to say yes and no to different products, different features, and
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's where we are a lot different in also how we bring in S3 when you compare it to big companies that were there forever, that have all that corporate governance and maybe also kind of more classic hierarchical leadership and things in place. This is where we're very different. We have no impediments in bringing in S3. It's more about what we do with it, that it actually ultimately works out for the business to grow and be sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the challenge that I've noticed as the Agile coach there is the need for constraint. So really at getting the group or the team to focus on the purpose of their domain and to deliver having the domains be distinct, having the purpose be clear, and to commit to doing only things that have to do with that. And it's been and still is a really hard journey in that regard, because there's a lot of legacy, not just technically but also culturally. There's a legacy of you have to exchange one-on-one in order to get anything resolved or done, or we don't have an official, like we don't have a channel for that, we don't have a process for thing XYZ, so let's make a new one up, right? That's still kind of a prevailing mindset. And so like what what Marco and I have been doing in the realignment is to really help the groups to focus on what is their domain, what drivers they need to be resolving, focusing on, and in the idea of how do we navigate the dance, right? How do we do the dance? That's where the external perspective and challenge is really crucial, I think. I say this being the one who is providing that a lot, but because it's one thing for the groups to define drivers, and it's an organizational drivers, and another one to bring them in effectively, and that's where the leadership that I have in the DCs, and also Marco, is really instrumental to these drivers being brought in with the timing needed at the phase of development needed. We're like POs for the governance backlogs in a way.
Okay, so Kathy, I just would love to hear more perspectives and more about from those who stayed on what's happening for them right now in relation to everything in the chat.
I have one question. I haven't looked at the list of patterns for a while, but is there a pattern for introducing S3 to an organization?
There is a category of patterns called bringing in S3. So there are some options there. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
I have a quick question as well, because you talked about the external support as crucial to this change, and I wonder how many of you were the drivers inside the organization for this change, because you always talk about the two of you, but yeah, for us, just a comparison, we are a network of schools, and we are bringing in S3. I'm here for 6 months. And me and one of the founders are the drivers. And we see that, okay, I think we should just be a bigger group somehow. So, because the two of us, we just can't be there in every meeting to push or not push, but try out or practice S3. So how's it for you?
It was me, and then when Cassie started, also her. But I think it's what really changed for me is that I stopped to try bringing in S3 as I started to make people use S3 to solve the issues or address the opportunities as they come up. And I think it's more about actually leading on what needs to be done and instead of being effective. And also what Cassie said, to this higher purpose of the company and the principle of effectiveness. And it's more about that, in my opinion. It's not about leading to bring in S3. I personally don't really see the point in we need to bring in S3. It's about what do you want to change? Is it how you make decisions? So that's your driver. You want to make decisions differently in the future. So you try to bring in the principle of consent and so on. And then you need someone who pushes that, or a group. And I think it's all about that. It's not about this general who drives the bring in S3 thing, right? It's always in context. And so maybe the answer is try to have someone in the group where it matters, and that someone should bring these things forward. It's a little bit what we do at the moment with having a team facilitator in every team and trying to support them also with using S3 patterns or in how to do Scrum and so on. And they will hopefully be the driver in their team, so that it moves away from Cassie and me more to the people in the teams where stuff actually happens, where value is created.
Yeah. And that said, Marco and I are still driving it, but we basically delegated, these not just delegated these tasks, but we have these team facilitators as our apprentices, and so they're learning from us about how really how to do S3, how to do the patterns that are relevant in their context, and it isn't just the team facilitators. If there's other roles. The intention is with particular trainings for that role, we give them the patterns that they need just the ones that they need in their context to start with, so then they can use them, and they're not dependent on you. It's kind of like the external consultant idea of like, you come in for like however many, 6 months, a year, or whatever, to help the company get on its feet, to be that external voice. But ultimately, it's about that company being able to do those things themselves.
Mm.
It's always, in my opinion, it's always leaders that, for example, introduce self-organization, self-management. You need leaders, but not in the classic sense of that being the boss of the company or a team or so. It's more like someone needs to lead that we change, and whoever that might be. I mean, in a kind of a delegated company, as we now see us, like where we have this higher purpose, and then we delegate stuff, as we presented in the first part of this case study. I think that's the key, and that's also where it starts. Because we also clearly give constraints that decisions are made using or valuing the principle of consent, for example. This is things we give as constraints also when delegating domains. And I think then people will also see that enabling constraint, and they need to deal with it, and that's where they need support. And then we can shift that leadership to bring in S3 to those who actually need it over time. But we are in the beginning of that. It's still a lot with SCME and maybe one or two others.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, if I consider the whole organization as a whole, and like the Shuhari sort of stage of development, I think we're still at Shu very much. But we're moving, we're really evolving well now, and I think in a direction that's that we need to be going right now.
Thanks a lot for your answer, and I have to leave because I have a one-on-one for
Okay.
15 minutes already. Thanks.
Yeah, have a nice day.
Bye, Kathy.
Curious about the comment that we had earlier about that it's a lot of work. But I'm thinking, and maybe it's hard for you as you are inside the company, but I mean, you could have spent your time and energy in different ways, building a more classical, hierarchical organization, perhaps at lower cost right now. But I would be curious to know if it isn't an investment in decision-making capability, that the teams can create proposal, that you have dynamic governance that can sort of be a breeding organ that will allow you to move and grow rather than being suffocated by bureaucracy at a bit of a longer time scale. So I'm just curious about your perspective, because to me it seems like, yes, there is a lot of hard work, but if you can get it going and if it can get a life of its own, maybe it's in the longer run actually more viable than, the classical old school alternative.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, it's really where we come from ultimately. I mean, it never was different. We never had this kind of classic leadership where someone tells others what to do and how to do things. And it would also not be acceptable by most of our employees, because it's a big reason why they started to work at Vshn, because they don't want to be in such a classic management structure. And on the other side, I think it's we in the management, but also a lot of people at Vshn, they really see that making decisions where they are needed and when they are needed, and with the people affected and those having expertise in the field, that's much more valuable than having a central management that defines how we do things. We tried that in like this, creating this task force to get that product going, and it was a total disaster, at least initially. And I think it's to prevent bad decisions or decisions that are not good enough for now.
Yeah, and as to long-term viability, it's my hope that Vshn will be able to evolve where that ultimately we are, our domains are even stronger, are more effectively self-organized, that our organization is more flexible, and that that we're able to get the most viability of starting where we are with this sort of chaos and converging where needed, to give us the shape that we want as an organization. And so yeah, I mean, it's indeed, maybe it would be cheaper to just bring in some fancy bosses and
cheaper, yes, because it's if we would just introduce a new salary system to everyone, then more than half of the company would possibly just leave. Mm-hmm. And then it would be cheaper short term, but it would also be the end of Vshn most likely. And I think it's not really a question after all at Vshn. It's about going forward and using what we always did, like our easiest way of content decision making, how we did things in the early days, and now we have to make it in a more conscious way and make and start to split things into teams and delegate responsibilities to not end up in total chaos, right? And then it's kind of obvious that we do the decisions there. But I mean, if a team would choose to have a leader and that leader decides for everyone, I mean, ultimately that could still be okay, but we don't have these people who really want that. So it won't happen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cultural thing. I mean, as Marco was saying in the presentation, like consent is really part of what we do, and making decisions together is really what we do. And so, if we try to grow in a way that's not that, then it would, I think, it wouldn't be Vshn.
No, I fully understand. So I'm more curious. I guess you have experience from other companies as well, because to me, the classical way of doing it is sort of like rolling a big ball of snow uphill, and it gets bigger. So you can push it to a certain extent with X number of managers or X bureaucracy. Then it will stop. You can get some more bureaucracy and more, and you will move it a little bit. But it's not a question of if the organization will sort of stall. It's just a question of when. Mm-hmm. And I would hope that what you feel at Vshn is more vibrant, that it's actually a living organism that is possible to move, and it's not the same basic equations.
Well, sure. No, I mean, I feel it's an organization in motion all the time. In fact, sometimes too wildly. So that it isn't helpful for us meeting our needs, right? And so I think that the trick is to focus on the need. What I would love to see is if over time that we could that the domains could really settle into their purposes and have these constraints that are right now seem so new or maybe so confining, to really become enabling and become the way that things are done, because that's the way that it works and actually does work, right?
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to add is the fact that as I see it, and I've seen many different examples, like people often start with the decision making, right? Because okay, we need to make this decision and we have different ideas and different opinions. So let's start with that. And that's totally fine. It's not in any way wrong. But what my experience and what I've also heard many people saying is that actually once you, bye Bernd, you will actually need less collaborative processes and bringing everybody together when people are clear on their area of work, when the purpose of the organization, the direction, the strategy is clear, and all those things are in place. You're not going to be so kind of roadblock or bottleneck by those things. And I think that's an important insight, because and it's also normal that in the beginning, when you start addressing these things that come up, decisions that need to be made and so on, it's going to be a lot more decision making than maybe you've ever done before, right? So there is in a way, I would say you could expect that you slow down in the beginning and it feels more heavy for a while until you've put in place more clarity, more constraints, more, and then you can perform, right? And so there is a kind of dance, I think, that happens. But people are scared of the fact that, oh my God, when they're starting and they need to make all these decisions, I think, oh, is this how it's going to be? I don't like it. I wouldn't. I can relate to that.
And also, I'll say, improving decision making is probably something that's very alive on the lowest implementation level for every team, that we're struggling to make decisions efficiently, then I think you're exactly right that a lot of those decisions are because of unclarity and misalignment. So quick thank you both. It's really nice to make this 2-part case study happen. I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Thanks for being here.
And Lily, thanks for giving us this opportunity to share with the community. I mean, I'm really I'm getting some messages from people talking about how it's helped them or questions that they have, and I think it's beautiful to see that our experience is helping other people to think and feel and maybe affect their own practice too. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it just makes things so much more real. And I'm excited to kind of, I think you guys portray really clear where you're coming from, which is and your history and how pulling in S3 in that particular context worked for you and your journey, which is probably going to be very different for an organization who's started off with a more classical hierarchical command and control and wants to bring that in. And I'm really excited about bringing that other perspective as well and all the nuances in between, because it's never like such a clear cut. So thank you for bringing this voice.
Okay.
Bye guys. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.